India's Finance Minister Arun Jaitey speaking on the occasion of India climbing up 23 places to rank number 77 in World Bank's Ease of Doing Business rankings. It's a significant jump because it was a 30-spot jump last year, and put this together, India has climbed significantly 53 notches in just 2 years. India now ranks in the top 25 in the world on 3 indicators of the survey: that's getting electricity, getting credit, and protecting minority investors. India is top 25 in the world in these 3. And apart from that, the 10 parameters that goes into deciding these rankings has witnessed India making giant strides in other parameters like construction permit. The biggest gain was in construction permits, where India climbed 129 ranks to the 52nd place. That's after the government's targeted efforts to remove the hurdles when it comes to getting construction permits. It's a big boost for the Narendra Modi government in India. India has climbed to the 77th rank in the Ease of Doing Business rankings. This essentially means India is in the top 70 to 80 countries when it comes to ease for investors doing business in India. And we're bringing to you non-stop live coverage here. Latest details coming out on what are the factors. Finance Minister Arun Jaitey also speaking about how the full impact of the GST implementation is yet to be recorded in these rankings, because these rankings took up only till about 31st December 2017, and the implementation was in July. And Finance Minister Arun Jaitey saying that the full impact and the benefits of the implementation of the goods and services tax will be felt in next year's rankings. Keep in mind, paying taxes is one of the important factors that go into deciding whether a country is easy for doing business or not. And we are getting you this benchmark survey that is considered as a litmus test for countries and their ability to make their regulatory environment easy for businesses to operate. And we have a couple of very special guests now joining us for this big breaking story. We have Richard M. Rosso, Senior Advisor and Wadhwani Chair in US-India Policy, joining us live from Washington, D.C. Richard, thank you so much for being with us. What the World Bank's ranking does is that it sends signals out to global investors. When they look at the plethora of opportunities where money can be invested, especially in emerging market economies, now India is emerging or has emerged as one of the top contenders, especially in the South Asian region.
Yeah, I don't know that necessarily around boardrooms, the ranking itself is the primary thing that they look at, but it is a great talking point as Prime Minister Modi and his top lieutenant travel around the world. And, probably most importantly, if you look at some of the factors the World Bank used in altering these rankings, GST, as you mentioned, the bankruptcy law, and what that means for creditors getting access in case one of their borrowers goes bankrupt. Those are the kind of things that businesses look at, is the kind of details that make that up. So businesses, a lot of times when they look for their specific business opportunity, they look at the micro pieces. But the World Bank is the great macro that provides great messaging and talking points for the government in talking about the things that they're doing on a wider basis.
Right, and India has made great strides when it comes to things like construction permits and also, taxes. We're talking about the full impact of the GST implementation yet to be felt in these rankings, Richard, because that was implemented only in July. We also have, meanwhile, another guest joining us, Mohan Guruswamy, Head Center for Policy Alternatives, joining us live from India's capital, New Delhi. Mr. Guruswamy, I have to ask you this. I know that these rankings are based on data collected from just Delhi and Mumbai, but still they represent a great sample for the way things have changed on ground in the country, would you say?
Well, it is change. Change is coming, and it's a good thing. But, I think we have a lot of distance to cover. I'm right now in Hyderabad, where construction permit still takes 6 months. So that's not very good. That's 180 days. So if you have improved things in Delhi, there are hardly any new starts coming up in Delhi, because Delhi is closed in terms of land and pollution. So you want new industries, you need to get easy accessibility of land which is difficult. Land is very difficult to buy. Land is difficult to register. And bank credit is being squeezed. Not much. The credit GDP ratio is still at 5 to 6%. And it's been like that flat for some time now. That needs to improve. You can't keep talking about availability, sanction of credit, and release of money, two different things. And final point I'd like to make is that there is much improvement in all sectors, in all parameters, but the worst parameter is always the critical path which a project has to take. And if you don't get your building permit or you don't get land registration, there's no point having credit and everything else in place. That will still determine the outcome. I think we need to improve, we need to have better coordination with the states, we need to make the states compete for investment, and therefore they have to improve. The central government really has very little to do with all this. Central government can only coordinate, and that it's still taken us 5 years to move. Despite its best efforts, I think much has to be done.
Right, Mr. Guruswamy, please stay with us. I'm going to take this back to Richard. Richard, do you concur with what Mr. Mohan Guruswamy is saying?
Yeah, entirely. I think the Modi government came out of the gates pretty strong in terms of encouraging states to compete. You saw the reformation of the Planning Commission and its new iteration as the Niti Aayog, and it does operate very differently from how the Planning Commission had operated. Creation of these ease of doing business rankings on different Indian states, the drafting of model laws and regulations for states to choose to adopt. So I think they came out of the gates pretty well in challenging states to do better. A lot more transparency on the business environment at the state level, things like that. But I think it's weakened over time. For instance, now you look at the ease of doing business rankings of Indian states. The DIPP judges it on more than 400 factors. But most Indian states rank at 95, 98% or higher. And I don't think credibly say that any Indian state is 98% of kind of best practice globally. Maybe 98% of a relatively weak level that the Indian government has set. So I think to Mohan's point, there needs to be kind of a reassessment about how well they're challenging states to do better. You've seen some states, I think dividing Andhra Pradesh has triggered those two states to be very competitive vis-a-vis because Andhra and Telangana both want to make sure they got a better environment. Rajasthan, Maharashtra, I mean, a few states have really taken the lead on doing big reforms, but other ones are laggards, and the center does need to do more to challenge them as they did early in Modi's tenure.
Right. Mr. Mohan Guruswamy, I want to ask you, we just heard the Finance Minister of India, Arun Jaitey, speak a short while ago, and he was stressing upon the fact that look at the improvement that India has made in these rankings from the year 2004-5 to now. India has gone from 130, 140 odd in the rankings to 77. So that's a quantum jump. That's a massive improvement, if not anything else.
There are two very different things at play here. One is the ease of starting a business. That might have improved. But the ease of doing or running a business, I don't think has changed very much. We still have problems with the banking sector. We still have problems with the labor sector. Labor becomes a burden. The problems of low productivity. Labor reforms have not taken place. Labor law reforms have not taken place. So lots of things are happening which need to happen. They haven't happened. You just can't say, giving sanctions is the be-all and end-all of ease of doing business. Ease of doing business, ease of running a business. And you still have power breakages because of bad maintenance of our power line. Lots of problems. We need much to do. And I think the central government should have monthly meetings on this with the state governments and prompt them to compete with each other on this. Just by doing superficial things, it does not improve things on the ground. First of all, I'd like to see labor reforms. Today, companies are afraid to hire people. So there's a lot of contract labor, and you're afraid to let your business grow because labor will become burdensome. So all these issues need to be dealt with. And the government still has to complete the reform process. And of course, there is a problem with cash shortage. You can get a sanction from a bank, but you may not get the money, release of funds. There's a lot of problems with that. I think we need to improve on that. There is a liquidity crisis in the market. All kinds of things are still happening. So you can't say everything is hunky-dory because the World Bank's rating has gone up or the World Economic Forum's rating has gone up and the Economic Freedom Index is better. That doesn't mean anything. Life on the ground is very different.
Mohan Guruswamy, Head Center for Policy Alternatives, joining us live from New Delhi and weighing in on these numbers, even as Richard Rosso Senior Advisor and Wadhwani Chair in US-India Policy Studies, joins us live from Washington, D.C. We also have our correspondent joining us from the National Media Center, India's capital, New Delhi, Wion's Sumit Chaturvedi now joins us. Sumit, it is a huge jump for the rankings, and we've seen India make improvements yet again this year, just like last year, on majority of the 10 factors that are used to decide whether it's easy to do business in a country or not.
Well, absolutely, Krishna here. Definitely, India has made a great stride as far as this is concerned. The improvement in rankings is concerned. So we are now at 77th place as compared to 100 at last year. But there are still improvements. While we were listening to FM Jaitey, who was saying that there are still improvements which are to be made as far as the contract obligations are concerned. There are 4 to 5 main areas where we have to do a lot, and these 4 to 5 areas will now be looked at and will be properly followed for the next few months. Important point here is that because it's an election year, so the incumbent government has very few months left to do some work. The next new government, when it comes, definitely will do some work. So the question is whether next year there will be any impact of being an election year. Or to this, FM Jaitey said the processes have been rolling on already, and not much of this will be impacting the ease of doing business in the coming year. So important point here is because of the being an election year, it won't impact next year's ranking much as well. But as you saw, well, we have improved definitely from 100 to 77, and there are many major benefits of it.
Sumit Chaturvedi joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you, Sumit, for joining us with that update. Let me quickly take this back to Richard M. Rosso, Senior Advisor and Wadhwani Chair in US-India Policy Studies, who joins us live from Washington, D.C. As well. It's the big story about tracking. The World Bank has released its Doing Business annual report, a practice that began back in the year 2003. And part of that is the Ease of Doing Business Index, or rankings, in which India has climbed 100 from rank 100 last year to rank number 77. That's a jump of 23 places. And last year, India had jumped over 30 places to go from 130 to 100. And now we have Richard Rosso and Mohan Guruswamy, head of Center for Policy Alternatives, joining us for this big story. Richard Rosso, the points that are being made is that the ground realities are something that needs to be taken into account. But help us understand this practice of releasing these Ease of Doing Business rankings by the World Bank began back in the year 2003. In the last 15 years, what purpose do you think it serves, and what does this, jumping up by 23 ranks to rank number 77, being in the top 25 on various parameters, mean for a country like India and its economy?
Well, having worked very closely with the Vajpayee government and the Manmohan Singh government when I was working at USIBC and other private sector roles, I'll say that, part of the impact depends on whether the government even cares. I never once heard the Vajpayee government or the Manmohan Singh government necessarily looking at the World Bank rankings as something that was kind of an imperative. That's a new dynamic the Modi government brought in. So really, the kind of importance of these rankings mostly matters depending on whether the country's leaders think that it's something that they should care about. Obviously, there's been a big drive, something that the Indian government has been unafraid to talk about the rankings. I mean, in other contexts, India, much like the United States, hates being held any kind of ranking by international institutions. So it is good and heartwarming, I think, to see these things embraced. It does offer very specific targets as well. Those that know how to work the system, make the reforms that are on paper, you can move up the rankings, by changing laws and regulations in a very practical way. But there's a whole lot of things that aren't covered. For instance, when you talk about trading across borders, when the World Bank this year talks about the big jump India took, they talk about things like electronic documents and e-sealing of container shipping, that kind of thing. What they don't talk about is the fact that India is kind of moving away from global trade integration with some of the pending trade agreements that were out there. So on one hand, they're doing things at the border that help. On the other hand, they're walking away from trade integration and trying to trade deals because that's not part of what they look at. Similarly, on the loans issues, they talk about the bankruptcy law and the fact that creditors can get paid a bit easier, but they're not talking about the overall banking crisis. So some stuff is in and some isn't.
Richard Amoroso, Senior Advisor and Wadhwani Chair in US-India Policy Studies, joining us live from Washington, D.C. And, of course, Mr. Mohan Guruswamy, Head Center for Policy Alternatives, who joined us live from New Delhi. Thank you, both of you gentlemen, for being with us here for this big story that we're tracking, the ease of doing business rankings that have been released by World Bank. India jumping up 23 spots to rank number 77. And with that, we've completely run out of time here. Thank you so much for watching.